Hi everybody, today's guest is not left-handed, he's also not a guitarist, but we will let most people in these days. His name is Simon Merry, he is a drummer, 47, originally from Northampton, now lives in London. Simon's played with many artists over the years, he's also done a lot of theatre, which is how I know him, as we've both been Deps on the London production of Mamma Mia for the last 7 or 8 years. I talked to Simon about his career and what it's like to actually rickroll people for a living. Hi Si.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for doing this. I have had to explain, though, that you're not left-handed and you're not a guitarist. So, but actually,
No.
I say that, but you do play guitar, don't you?
I do play a little bit of guitar. Not, I mean, I couldn't do a gig unless you've got one for me, but
Well,
I'm definitely not a left-handed guitar.
it doesn't matter.
How hard could it be?
Exactly. Everyone gets away with it. You're one of these people that I know who has just had a baby, and it's your first.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you getting on?
It is, yeah. We're getting on great. He's brilliant, life-changing, as you know. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of a perfect time to really be looking after a 5-month-old baby, because we're both at home. We've seen him laugh. He's just sort of about to crawl. He's doing that sort of thing. He's rolling over on his phone. So yeah, it's wonderful being around.
And also they change when they're that age. They change so quickly and so often. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We've been looking back. I mean, he's 5 months old. He was 5 months old yesterday. But we've been looking back at pictures when he was first born and gone, I can't remember him looking like that. It's just mad. But yeah, no, he's great. Thanks, mate.
Great, man. Right. Let's go back. Let's go back to the beginning. Yeah. So I usually start by asking people, like, what was it that made you start playing? Like for you, where did you grow up? What was it made you start playing? Who inspired you? Were any of your family musical? Just the whole shebang.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm from Northampton originally. My dad is a musician, so that's how I got into music. He's a piano player and used to play for, when I was a kid, like Lulu, Des O'Connor. He was Gene Pitney's musical director for like 40 years. He did loads of like summer shows and stuff. I mean, I remember he did 16 weeks in Scarborough, in a big show, twice a day. Monday to Saturday. So I remember as a kid just going into pits and watching a band. And there were big bands in those days. You'd have a horn section in there, a percussion, it's like sort of 12, 13 people in the pit. So yeah, and I got into it obviously because that's what my dad did. But I mean, I started playing piano. My dad sort of made me play piano when I was like 7 or 8. And I got to like grade 4, I think, something like that. And then I just sort of lost interest in it when I was about 10 or 11. And he knew that. He sort of knew that I wasn't really into the piano, and I wasn't really that great as well. And he didn't teach me because he didn't want me to pick up his bad habits. But I used to go to a piano teacher, and then I remember one day my dad said, "Oh, come and show me what you've learned." And I remember sort of playing on the piano, and I just kept on making mistakes in that. And I remember him looking at me and going, "You don't want to do this, do you?" And I thought, this maybe is the time to tell him I want to play drums. And you know what? He knew anyway, because he used to see me go to his gigs and stand by the drummer and watch the drums all the time. So he literally, just the following week we drove down to London. He bought me a drum kit, and I was like 11, I think then.
But so, it's nice, surely nice to have known, because I mean, I've got to say, this is why I love doing these things, because I've known you for quite a few years, and I never knew that. I never knew that about your dad. That's incredible. But that must have been great knowing he'd been there and done it, getting the support. Obviously all parents are supportive, and my parents definitely were, but they weren't musicians, but having a dad who's doing it on a daily basis, and you're growing up around it, really, you didn't really have much of a choice, I suppose, did you?
No, I didn't really know. That was the thing. But you know what? My dad gave me, it was good because he gave me my first sort of professional gig as well. When I was 18, he was touring with Gene Pitney, and the drummer couldn't do it, and I knew that stuff inside out because I'd known it. That's all I'd sort of listened to when I was a kid. I just went to all the gigs and watched Gene Pitney and watched the band play, so I knew it. But he said, "I've got to audition you." So my dad auditioned me for the gig, and he got the bass player around, went into the studio, and we sort of ran the gig. And he said, "Okay, yeah, okay. You know, you've got to be. The thing is, you've got to be as good as anyone else, really." So,
but that's great. That's great that he did that rather than just saying, "Oh yeah, my boy will do it." You know, he can play a bit of drums. Like the fact that he actually took it professionally.
Yeah, and obviously a bit of nepotism going on. Obviously, a massive amount of nepotism going on. But he didn't make it easy for me. He was tough on me. You know, it was like, and if I did anything wrong or made mistakes, he'd pull me up on it, and in front of the band as well, So it was, he was good in that way. So yeah, that's my dad really, who got me into it. Really, yeah.
So do you think the fact that it was such a trial by fire doing gigs like that, kind of thrown in at the deep end, and also was it twofold, like you not wanting to let yourself down as a young musician trying to make it out professionally, and also not wanting to let your dad down?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's difficult because when you're 18, a lot of my mates were just going to nightclubs, pulling birds, and and I was practicing all the time or doing gigs basically. So I threw myself into it, and yeah, you're right. It was a deep end, and I think that's the only. Well, for me, that was the only the only way you can sort of do it. I think my dad's very much like that as well. Just sort of, come on, get on with it. It's see how you do. And also he was the one who encouraged me to move to London, because he said, look, you're not going to learn anything in Northampton. You just you've done as much as you can here. And I was playing with local bands, and kind of the thing I wanted to do was move to London, but I also didn't want to move to London because I thought, well, I'm doing all right here in Northampton. Well, why do I have to move to London? Where everyone else is. So it was quite a scary moment. It was quite a scary moment moving to London. But my dad had said, "Do it. You've got to do it." So
before we get onto like moving to London and getting onto the circuit and the scene and stuff like that, you started playing 11 or 12 years old. So before, like the period where you first started learning, before doing like your gigs that your dad started getting you onto stuff, tell me a bit about practice and inspirations and heroes and stuff like that.
Okay. So when I was young, the first drummer I got into was Buddy Rich.
Right.
And my drum teacher, my first drum teacher, a guy called Keith Cumberbatch, he got me this Buddy Rich snare drum rudiments book, which I have just here.
Yes, look at that.
Look how old it is, which was brilliant. So I've just started going through it again now. I've got loads of time, but he got me into listening to Buddy Rich, and obviously back then it was all like sort of, it was either tapes or albums and stuff. So I didn't have a lot to go on, but he gave me a couple of tapes and that, so I listened to him. I never got to see Buddy Rich, and I really wish I had done, because he died in probably late 80s. But so yeah, that was kind of my first. My dad listened to a lot of jazz as well and big band. So yeah, I listened to that, and obviously then I started got into pop. Started to listen to a lot of pop music. I was a massive Level 42 fan, so I loved Phil Gould. So he was another person that I used to there was a live at Wembley gig, 86 I think it is, and I literally played that VHS until it wore out, and practiced along to it and stuff.
Yeah.
And we had the drum kit up in the attic at the time, and it was and where the drum kit was above my mum and dad's bedroom, and the ceiling came down. Well, not while I was up there, thank God.
Oh, God.
But obviously, like months and months of me whacking the hell out of the drum kit in the attic, going down. So then my dad built a shed in the garden.
Amazing.
But yeah, that was my Yeah, early years of it, I suppose.
Do you remember the first time you played, like your first gig, like in front of a crowd of people? The first time, like you kind of performed either with a band or what was it?
I think it must have been school. It must have been school band because we had quite a good school band actually. Um, uh, and funny enough, I met one of the guys I was at school with who was in the band, the guitar player guy, last year, and he sent me a recording of a gig we did at school. So and that was it. That was in front of it was like the end of the week, and like Friday afternoon, and we did a gig in the school hall, behind the curtains and stuff, and we were all getting ready, and that was probably the first time, and it's sort of, because there was probably like, I don't know, 400 kids there, all, I suppose that was kind of the first experience of an audience. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and we sounded not bad actually. I heard it the other day. We weren't too bad at all.
But there's such great times, aren't they? Because like you learn so much of what you do in those early years and those early gigs, and and what you think is a great gig, and then you'll have a terrible gig, and it doesn't matter, man. It's all just part of your craft, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's move on to where we left off earlier about moving down to London then. So how was that moving down to London, knowing where, especially at that time, that's where all the work was for any budding muso? Why would you want to sort of throw yourself in, and how would you start, and how would you get work? How did it all go for you?
When did I move to London? So 90s. So, I knew when I moved to London, I knew one person, I knew one bass player, a guy called James Winchester, who sadly died a few years ago. But he was in a band, like a covers band, and he sort of got me into that band, doing decks for their drummer, who was away quite a lot, and and it sort of snowballed from there. And from that, I met other people, and then there was an agent called Simon Howison, who's still going, and he got me a lot of work as well. And back then it wasn't emails and stuff. It was all like handing in your tape and and posting stuff. That's that, and you'd wait ages to get a response from anything. Like I got Melody Maker and all that, looking at I went to so many auditions. Many auditions. In fact, in that Buddy Rich book, I found a letter from EMI, a rejection letter for auditions for a band. Didn't even say what band it was, but it just said I'd obviously sent in a CV and a tape. And it said, unfortunately, you weren't successful in your applications. And it also said, we enclosed your tape as well. Let's send it back to me.
It's funny though, because I remember going for things like that as well, back in Melody Maker jobs and all that.
Yeah.
Going into town, audition with a band, who was signed and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then being really gutted when I didn't get it, but then I never heard of them again. They never went on to do anything. So I thought,
that's the thing.
What am I actually missing out on here?
And the thing is, a lot of those auditions you went for, the band thought that it were the best thing in the world as well, and that made you think they were as well. So when I'd be terrified, absolutely terrified, going into auditions, and being outside and seeing other drummers there, and then and you walking in and it's like they're all there with their cool hair and man, and it's just like,
and also trying to adapt your style to what it was, just because you wanted a gig. I remember going for something that was really Brit poppy. I think it was like the brother of one of the guys from Supergrass or something like that.
Right.
And it was just like, that was not my bag, but I didn't care, and I would just try and do it. But they could obviously they just took one look at me and thought, I got it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's because there's a lot of those. I did a lot of those auditions and stuff. I mean, yeah, it was a weird time, but that was it was mid-90s, and that's how you sort of got your name around, really. By doing that. Really, there was no Facebook.
No, of course.
It was it was hard. It was really hard. But,
so where did you end up? Essentially, like, how long did it take you to get up and running down there, and like tell me about like the first, after doing like playing in bands and stuff in town, like getting onto playing with the artists that you've played with. How did that all work out?
Well, in sort of mid to late 90s, I got myself in a band that was signed to Sony in America, though. And we had a bit of success out there.
What was the name of the band?
It was called Shooter. And we had a single on what was the thing called Dawson's Creek. There was an American show called Dawson's Creek. And they had an album. They had their album of songs, and we were on that album. And we toured with Destiny's Child. In fact, Destiny's Child supported us on a like a 5-day tour, because they were just starting out, because they were signed to the same label.
Wow.
So we did that for a couple of years, and then obviously it didn't work out. And then I was a bit disillusioned when that had all finished, because we'd gone out to America thinking we were going to be megastars, and it didn't work out obviously that way.
Sure.
But it was all a bit deflating when we came back. So, but the guy who managed the band was this Simon Harrison agent. So he started putting me up to stuff as a session player then, just for artists. So so I was back into sort of auditioning again.
Yeah.
And some I didn't get, some I did get. But I think after that, the first sort of big gig I did was Natalie Imbruglia, the Australian singer.
Sure.
So I toured with her for a couple of years.
Was this when Mal was doing it as well? Or we've got
this was when Perry from Pendulum was the MD.
Oh, okay.
Perry, Perry Aquinid? He's the Welsh. Him and his brother were in the band. So Perry and Reg is his brother. So this is her old band. This is almost like her original band from the 90s. So so I did that for a couple of years, and that's then it sort of snowballed from there, really. And I think because at the time she was kind of a big deal, and I think once you have kind of a bit of a you do a name gig, people sort of took a bit more interest in me.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be like that, really, but it is, I'm afraid. But it's so I ended up doing some quite nice gigs after that, really. And from Natalie, whilst I was doing Natalie's gig, I got a call from her manager, who also managed George Michael at the time, and he just said to me, "Oh, Simon, are you around tomorrow?" I said, "Oh yeah, I can be," thinking it was something to do with Natalie. He said, "Oh, it's George Michael's drummers can't do this show we've got, so it's a rehearsal and a live TV on Parkinson.
Okay.
Are you around?" And I went, yeah, of course I'm around. So I ended up doing that, and that was a real sort of milestone in my career, because George Michael was was sort of still is a megastar, and that was
and that was a live performance. It wasn't a mime.
No, it was live. Yeah. So we did a day's rehearsal for one song, and then did it the following day. But yeah, that's the only time I've been starstruck as well. He was just it was his band that had been with him for years, and me. So and we started rehearsals. He wasn't there, and then he came in, and everybody sort of shut up, and then manager came over with him and said, "Oh, this is Simon, we're playing drums, blah blah." And I remember stood up, I shook his hand, and I was literally like, "Oh." The guy had like an aura around it. It was like, "Whoa, this is George Michael." It was mad. Yeah. Like, "Oh, hello."
Trying to remain professional, but there's just sometimes you can't. Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, that was because I played for Natalie, and it just happened they had the same manager. But that's how things work out in this industry. It's who you know, and
yeah, of course. So moving on then, I'm trying to bridge the gap to Rick, basically. So what happened between then and ending up with Rick?
So how I ended up playing for Rick Astley. So there was all these sort of retro festivals that are massive now.
Yeah.
That started like sort of maybe 10, 15 years ago. So there was this guy started, Tony Denton, his promoter. He had a thing called Here and Now, and it was artists from back in the day, most of the 80s. And I got a call to come in and be in the house band, because basically it would be a big show, an arena somewhere, and they'd have a house band, and they'd just bring on whoever, and you'd back them basically. So Rick was on one of those shows, which was kind of weird for me, because Rick Astley was the first gig I went to see in 1988.
Really?
Yeah, at Birmingham NEC. Even weirder than that is that I went with the girl I was going out with at school to see the gig, because her dad managed Rick.
No way.
So when I met Rick, I went, "Oh, I came to see you in 1988, and I was going out with your manager's daughter." And he went, "What, Rachel?" Little Rachel. Yeah. So yeah, there was a bit of a connection there. So anyway, Rick had sort of just come back to do this like one-off thing. He'd retired basically. He retired in the 90s. He just he'd had enough of the music industry, so he'd come back, and then he started doing gigs really, and he asked me to be in his band and stuff.
So what year was that?
It was probably 2009, 2010, around then.
So this is something I really need to point out that's important, right? Is that you joined him on the basis that at the time he'd done nothing for so long.
Yeah.
You didn't know where it was going to go. And as a lot of these other like 80s bands and stuff, you perhaps assumed it would be on those Here and Now, Rewind, all of those kind of tours.
Yeah.
Now, little did you know that a few years down the line, he'd release an album that would be huge, and in doing so, you would go along with the wave kind of thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. It was. We talk about it a lot actually, because we've been on that roller coaster with Rick, where it's like, I mean, we were Butlins, we were doing those sort of gigs. I mean, and nothing against those gigs. In fact, Butlins gigs are always a great laugh actually, because everybody's absolutely hammered. So it's
they clap loads.
Yeah. So including the band. But yeah, so we've gone from sort of doing those gigs to like, doing arenas. And for this album that he did, it was called 50. It was when he turned 50. He just released an album. I think he wrote the album just for himself. He didn't actually, because he didn't have a record deal when he was writing the album. And I think someone just got hold of it and went, "Oh, this is great." So it was. I mean, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. He's so great, and he's brilliant on stage. He's just, whether you're a fan of his or not, you'd go home going, "Wow, that was good." Because he's an entertainer,
of course. And also he always comes across now that he's got nothing to lose. He's not got to prove anything to anybody, because he went there back in the day. He sort of gave it all up and planned on retiring, and then had this second lease at it. And and that's the greatest thing. And so did you have any inkling at all that going from doing all those sort of standard gigs with him, the normal sort of smaller gigs, did you have any inkling that all of a sudden it would change because of the album? And how quickly did it change when you started doing the arenas and all the big stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know. I didn't think it was going to it would get like that. But I think once the album did do well and everything, it started to change. You could see people sort of taking him a bit more seriously, and I think he came away from the retro thing. He decided not to do the retro festivals. Which I think was a good thing, because it's sometimes you can be too tied to that. People just go, "Oh, just play your stuff, your hits want to hear," and I think since the album came out, and he's had a couple of albums since then, people now come to listen to the other stuff as well. So yeah, I'm just pleased it happened to him really, because like I said, he's just such a great guy. And it's a great gig as well. The band are great. It's I couldn't wish for a better gig really.
Yeah, great, man.
I'm
And what
lucky
was the bizarre? What have been some of the more bizarre moments with him? Because what was the thing with the Foo Fighters?
Oh my God, that was weird. So yeah, we did this Summer Sonic Festival in Japan. It's huge. It's a bit like, I suppose it's a bit like our sort of V Festival, kind of, where there's one in Tokyo, one in Osaka, and then they switch
Okay.
like the following day. Or so where were we? We're Tokyo, and so the Foo Fighters were headlining in the stadium, and we'd been on earlier on in the daytime, so we were on at about everything's on quite early in Japan. Nothing goes past about 9 o'clock. But we were on at about 2 in the afternoon, and the Foo Fighters were on at like 7. So we were done by like 3. And Rick was going, oh, we can go and see the Foo Fighters apparently. But apparently we can just, they'll take us, because you have to get in a minibus and get there, because it's in a big area. And I was like, oh, I don't know whether we should just go back to the hotel and chill and get something to eat and all that sort of thing. Anyway, we had a few drinks in the afternoon, watched a few other bands. Then it got to like 6 o'clock, and he went, should we do it? I said, yeah, okay. So anyway, our tour manager sorted it all out. We got in this minibus. We ended up going to behind the stage, and then we were thinking, oh, well, they're just going to put us somewhere like out. I don't know. It was in a stadium, so we thought like a box or something, some sort of area. But anyway, we were right at the side of the stage, literally next to the guitar tech and all the guitars and stuff.
Wow, feeling right in the way.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And then they walk out, and it's brilliant, and the crowd are going nuts and that. And then you can see Dave Grohl sort of looking over every now and then, and Rick said that he thought that he was looking at his guitar tech, like, there was something wrong, but he kept on looking over. And eventually Dave Grohl just came off stage and went up to Rick and went, "You're Rick." Like that, anyway, and they sort of literally just went, "Hey, well, fucking high-fived each other or cuddle, whatever it was."
In the middle of the gig?
Again. Yeah, right in the middle of a stadium gig.
Wow.
And then about 10 minutes later, a tour manager or somebody came over and said, "Dave wants you to get up and sing," like that. So anyway, and before he'd even had the chance to think about it, Dave Grohl just shouted, "Come on, we're going to get someone out, blah, blah," and then got him out. And he came out on stage and nothing was planned at all. And weirdly, they'd been rehearsing Never Gonna Give You Up for something they were doing in America the following week. They were just learning it for something they were doing. And they realized that they could play Smells Like Teen Spirit over the top of it. So they did like a mashup, and if you watch it back, you can see Dave Grohl literally whispering Rick's ear to say, "Look, we're going to do this, blah, blah, just follow us." And that's how it happened.
Oh my God.
And even more bizarre was, about 10 minutes before the gig ended, the manager came over again and said, "Do you want to hang with the guys afterwards?" And we were like, yeah. So after the gig, they came off stage, got into like a people carrier. Behind their people carrier was a people carrier for us, and they had a police escort back to their dressing room, which was off-site. It was quite a way away, and we were following behind them. They got out, went to their rooms. They put us in a green room, and then they just came in, and we just hung with them for like 2 hours.
Amazing.
It was mad.
It's better than going back to the hotel for a sandwich and a kip, like you were thinking before,
exactly.
Right?
Which is what Adam, our guitar player, did.
No way.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. You ever see him? Mention it to him.
Oh my God, this is amazing. That's whenever I do meet him, that's going to be my opening gambit. Yeah. So tell me about going back to the hotel for a sandwich. You're missing out on a historical event, like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, he said he sort of got into bed and he had the TV on and he ordered some room service, and he said, because we're all in a group WhatsApp, he just saw all the pictures coming through. It was like a picture of me with Taylor Hawkins and our front of house engineer with Dave Grohl with his arm around him and stuff. And he was just like going, "No!"
Oh, poor lad must have been crying.
Oh, I know. It was. But I mean, it was one of those things. It was so not planned, and everything about. I think they're the best nights, aren't they? Where who knows what's going to happen. But it was. I mean, literally, you couldn't meet a nicer bunch of guys. Right. You think that the whole rock star thing, they're going to be a bit too cool for school. Dave Grohl was just like the most normal person I've ever met in my life.
Great, man. That's how you want him to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, since then, Rick and Dave Grohl have become quite good friends, and they text each other, and if they're over in London, Dave Grohl will ask Rick to come along to some gig, or they'll do, they'll end up doing something together. So they've actually formed quite a nice relationship.
That's brilliant. Also, the fact that the story you've just told has become kind of infamous. You know what I mean? Like, because I've heard Rick talk about it before. The fact that you were there for it and you saw it all happen firsthand, man. What a moment. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I was there because I was standing next to Rick. So it was almost like I was him. It was like Dave Grohl came over. It's like, oh shit!
You just stood there like
TV. Not me. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah.
So, other than Rick, you've done some. Albeit depths or gigs, you've played with other sort of 80s bands as well. Go West, Bananarama. You did one of the recent tours with those girls, didn't you?
I did their reunion tour when the original three got back together. So it was when Siobhan came back, because she'd gone off in the 80s to do Shakespeare's Sister. So the original three got back together. And that was great. I mean, it was a sellout, that tour. We did like 3 nights at Hammersmith Odeon.
Great.
Bizarrely. I've done a lot with them. Go West I've decked quite a bit on, and I love that gig. It's such a great gig.
I bet.
And now Ben, our friend Ben Lockery, he does another Lefty.
Yeah, I'm desperately. I know we had a conversation before I started recording this, but Ben is a friend of ours. He's a Lefty guitarist. He's in Australia at the moment, and I'm trying to get him on here, but we're just trying to work out the right time that we can both do it, but he will be on it because he's brilliant,
Well, Ben was, so talking of auditions, so Go West drummer was on tour, and Go West were auditioning guitar players, and Ben was one of the guitar players who came to the audition.
Right.
So I remember we rehearsed at Bush Studio, I auditioned at Bush Studios, and I think they had to play We Close Our Eyes and Don't Look Down or something. But yeah, there was load of, I mean, it must have been 10 guitar players that day, but Ben just came in, and it was like, oh, fucking hell, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is it. I mean, bearing in mind his dad was in Go West as well.
Yeah, and that's
so.
That's so. I mean, that twofold really. The fact that you were there for him on his audition must have been great. That you had a familiar face, and also the whole thing that our other friend Ben's dad, the legend that is Jazz Lockery, was also a touring bass player for Go West in the 80s as well. So it sort of comes full circle, doesn't it? So that's
and I got when I got home for that day, Jazz texted me to say, how did the boy do?
Right,
like that, and I just put, I said, he did great, mate. I said if it was down to me, he'd be in, mate, but it's not, And he said, and he just put, oh, sorry, just nervous bag.
Oh,
but I mean, Ben smashed it. There was never going to be anyone else who was going to, certainly from that day, who was going to do it a better job.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
And he had all that. I mean, he grew up listening to that stuff. I think he's got Alan Murphy's guitar. So,
I heard that.
Yeah, I think he's got it. I think he's got it on his wall at home. But so he had all that sound down. Alan Murphy's sound, which is the Go West sound, isn't it? So,
yeah, I mean, it's funny because he, like you say, he would have grown up around it, just like he grew up sort of sitting in the pit with Jazz, doing Mamma Mia, and then he started depping on Mamma Mia, which is something we should mention because that's something that we both do. How long have you been a depp on Mamma Mia in London?
I've done Mamma Mia. It must be 8 or 9 years now. It's got to be. I mean, the show's been going for about 100 years.
Yeah, I think it's 115 years it's been going for.
And long may it continue. That was kind of my first sort of dip into the West End depping, really. And I've done a few things since then, but that was the most terrified I've ever been, I think, depping on a West End show.
This is the third conversation I've had with someone, and this whole thing keeps coming up of how, and that's the word I usually use, terrifying it is your first time. The weird thing is, I've often thought for you as a dep on Mamma Mia doing your first one, the drums are obviously in a back room. They're not in the pit.
Yeah.
So there's a big divide between you physically and the pit and the audience. Did it help you being back there, or is it worse because
I don't know. I mean, for me, because I really hadn't done much of that sort of thing before, it was, I didn't really know any different. So
yeah,
the weirdest thing was back then is that the drums figured the clicks.
Oh, really?
Originally, yeah. So you literally have your hand on a start button, and it was as you know, it was bar one, beat one. Go. It was in. It was like that. So.
And the click now is done by the click now is done by the Keys 4 chair, isn't it?
Yeah. So
you had to. So your first step on the show, you're in charge of the click, and oh man, forget it.
It was horrible. Honestly, I've never been so scared. In fact, Frosty, the drummer who does the show,
the legend is Frosty B.
He is the legend. He is a legend indeed. He was behind me, watching me, obviously taking notes, which is also terrifying.
Yes.
And he said that because I had to start the clicks. He said your hand was doing this.
I bet.
Waiting for the cue, and
Yeah.
But it was, I mean, it went well. I like to think because they've asked me back, but it was horrible, and I don't know how people. I know a lot of people do that for a living, depping in the West End. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I've said, on the previous ones of these, I've done quite a few now, but it doesn't really get any easier, But I think it's great at keeping you on your toes. And the other strange thing is what I haven't mentioned so far. What you just touched on is with some shows, and definitely Mamma Mia, when you go in as a dep for the first time, the person who holds a chair sits and babysits you. So not only have you got everything else going on in the show and the band and the audience and blah, 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 you've got the guy who you're potentially going to be covering for doing lots of work in the future sat right next to you. And that's kind of a weird thing as well. And I'm not sure what's more daunting, having them sat next to you, but then I've done quite a lot of deps where you don't get babysat and you just turn up and you just do the gig. It's a weird one. And I think that's probably better because you can just completely focus on
get on with it. Yeah.
Rather than knowing, mind you, I got to say, when I first went in for Terry, which must be 8 years ago, he was just basically sat there on his iPad, not really. I think he was looking at guitars or something.
I mean, the thing is, I always set up to say that drums are any harder than anything else, but I think because drums are so different and players are so different with drums, you know what I mean? It's a there's so much going on, different things. I think that can be a there's so many tiny little bits, or that hi-hat part's not this, all that, you can't, you try and go in and emulate as much as you can as the person who does the gig, but you can't really because every player is different.
Yeah, and also there's a part of you that wants to emulate the original song itself, but in a strange way you're not. You're playing how the person you dep for would play that song.
Absolutely.
And naturally, you can't hide your own spin on things. Whatever instrument you play, there's always going to be part of you come out, even if it's the most minute thing in a little bit of vibrato here or a little something there. And with drums, it's the same. I've played the show many, many times with you. I've played the show many, many times with Frosty. It's all absolutely in the right place, but it's different. You know what I mean? It sounds different because you're different players. It's impossible to be exactly the same as someone else.
Yeah. And the thing is, sometimes you sort of go in, if you haven't been in for a while, and you expect to come out of there and everyone go, oh, that was fucking great. And no one says anything. And you think, have I done something wrong?
Right.
Or, you get really sort of like paranoid.
Yeah.
That and I think that's another part of the West End, because it's they do 8 shows a week, for how many years? It becomes a job, isn't it? And,
that's right.
Absolutely. For us going in depping, which is a big deal, you think, well, everyone's just like, oh, should go to the pub.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just another Friday night or a Monday night for them or whatever,
But I like I said, I don't do loads of depping in the West End, but it is you've got to have nerves of steel really going in there, and
but I think it really does keep you on your toes, and it keeps you a good musician, and you don't get stuck in a rut. And also it's the personal challenge of like when you're sent a pad for a new show to go and dep on, and you think, God, you know, and you look at the first page, you think, here we go again, you know, and you're going through it. But that's what keeps you good, man. Yeah, that's what keeps the engine running, I think, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Let's talk about some of this might go over my head, but I will try my best. Let's talk about gear. What gear do you use?
Right. So I've recently got a new drum deal with Natal.
Okay, that I do know
because you know because of Marshall,
yeah. So who do you deal with? Is it George? Yeah, wow, he's still there.
George Frederick. So George Frederick, so a few years ago he worked for Premiere,
right?
And I was with them. So and then I had a deal after that with someone else, and then I've only recently got in contact with George maybe a couple of years ago, and I just said, I'm out of a deal. He said, well, look, I'm with Natal now. And we were doing, so Rick was supporting Take That on their big tour. And we were playing the Milton Keynes football stadium.
Yeah, which is across the road from Marshall.
Exactly. So he just said, look, why don't you pop in to Marshall? And I've got an office here and come and look at some of the gear. So yeah, I went into the, into there, and we had a nice chat and tried some drums out. And yeah, funny enough, I took Rick there because Rick's got a Natal drum kit as well. So Rick came up with me it might have been about this time last year, just before lockdown. We drove up to Milton Keynes, and George went, we'll do a tour of the factory.
Classic factory tour.
So yeah, so it was really good. So he ended up showing us around everywhere. And we got through freebies, and then there was a strange little room where they said there's one guy who just tries the guitars.
Yeah, it's tries
the amps.
Yeah, it's the final test room, isn't it? The production line rolls through a little room, and there's a guy in there.
That's it.
Yeah,
because Rick was like, "Oh, what song do you play on the guitar through the amps?" He said, "Well, I've only got one string."
Yeah, exactly. He's just hitting a string, bless him. Do you know what though? In a strange turn of events, when I was very young, before I had any connections with Marshall whatsoever, I looked around the Marshall factory just as a fan, because I used to go to all the guitar shows, and I used to get Jim to sign my posters. And there was one time, me and my dad went to look around the factory, and I remember going into that little room, and there's the guy just doing a line test on the final amp before it goes into be packaged up. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be the guy in that room. You know what I mean?
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But yeah, no. So anyway, I've got that. So that's I'm with Natal now, and I mean, I got the kit about a year ago, but obviously we were supposed to go on tour last May, and then obviously that didn't happen. So
what you're trying to say is Natal signed you up as a new artist, and you do absolutely nothing for a year.
Exactly. I've done one gig on the new kit. So it was back in September. We did one of those drive-in gigs, which was, lucky we could do one of those things. But we were supposed to do another one, but it all got lockdown happened again. But so I've used that kit. I've used that kit once, and it's just now sitting in a lockup, which is a shame, really. But I mean, I can't wait to get out and just start playing again. Really.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it will come, man. It will come. And you've got a nice new kit to play on. What about cymbals and stuff like that?
Zildjian cymbals.
What about sticks? Vic Firth?
Sticks. Vic Firth, yeah.
Are they 5As? Oh, 5Bs.
5Bs. Almost.
Oh, it's close.
Yeah, would tip 5Bs. Again, I haven't. I mean, it's. I mean, I'm literally just got a practice pad where I'm just having to keep my chops up every now and then. I haven't got the room to play a full kit, but I've got a studio that I use around the corner, so I'll go there every now and then.
Yeah, great, man.
Yeah. So that's the thing with drums. You've got to have a lot of room, or you've got to have a soundproof room.
The most impractical thing to play, really, aren't they? Have you ever used an electronic kit? Well, I got one for my kids, which they use.
Yeah, I have, but it's not the same.
No, of course.
And also they're really expensive, aren't they? If you get top notch one, they're like $3 or $4 grand.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
But no, I haven't. I mean, funny enough, I did another show that I depped on in the West End was the Commitments,
right?
And that was all on electric kit, which was a playing soul music on an electric kit, which was really weird. And then it kept breaking, and as a deaf, it was just a nightmare. Sometimes you hit the hi-hat and nothing would happen. It'd be like,
my God.
Yeah, stay away from electrics.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Anyway, Simon Mary, thank you very much.
Chris George. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate.